I knew this silkscreen printer back in Virginia. He printed all the T-shirts and anything that we had print on for the regional ministries, so like youth ministry, camps, women's ministry, men's ministry. And like a lot of good Southside Virginia boys, he went by his initials. He was H.B. Atkinson. Wonderful guy. And I like doing business with H.B. because H.B. knew Jesus. H.B. was a follower of Christ. He got what we were trying to do as a region. He got our camp programs, and he knew how to work with us and always give us the best deal on what we could do. And so every year the region would hold a contest for submitting the winning camp T-shirt design. And so we'd get all of these submissions from all over the state to use as our camp T-shirt design, and the Outdoor Ministry Committee would pick the winner, and then we'd take that winning artwork to HB. And inevitably, every single year, I would bring that artwork into HB and show it to him, and he'd say, "You're killing me, Jesse. You are killing me." Because inevitably, there was always something about that artwork that wasn't going to be easy to print. Either the lines were too thin or too thick, or there was too many colors, or it was too big, or it was too little. It was always something. It was always, "Jesse, you're killing me. You're killing me, Jesse." But HB delivered. He was always the person who could make that artwork work. And so he and I would sit down in front of his Mac, and I'd get a little lesson on Adobe Illustrator, and he would show me how he took that artwork and made it to where he could print. But while we were sitting behind that Mac, we always managed to talk about faith. We always managed to talk about ministry and church. HB went to a megachurch in Lynchburg, Virginia, and not the one that's been in the news lately. But HB went to this megachurch. He didn't often agree with the church's theology or their politics, but he was young, and he liked the music, and there were more people there that were his age, and they had a good children's program and everything like that. And I said, "You know what? You would have made a great disciple, HB. You really would have," because he's, like I say, very fair and balanced person. He was not a person who let a church's doctrine shape what he did and how he carried out his ministry in life. He let his faith dictate that. So he was a great person, but anytime we'd sit down and talk about church, he would kind of complain about his church. He says, sometimes they preach about politics more than Jesus. Or, sometimes they spend more time talking about what they stand against rather than what they stand for. But the thing that drove him crazy, the thing that he just could not stand, was that everyone was expected to put on a happy face. He said, these people just seem so fake sometimes, like it's a sin to come to church with anything but a smile on your face. In fact, he said that the staff at the church would actually reprimand people, volunteers and staff, if they were not sufficiently exuberant and happy, especially when they led worship. If a leader came off as maybe distracted or sad or something like that, the staff would come along and say, "Listen, here it is in Philippians chapter 4, verse 4, Paul says, 'Rejoice in the Lord always.'" So if you're not rejoicing, you're not following what the Bible says. So HB had a little hard time reconciling that with Jesus' words when Jesus said, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." But he also noted that sometimes the church seemed a little more interested in what Paul said than what Jesus said. But let's give Paul some credit here. Let's look at this passage. Because this passage that HB said was quoted to make sure that everybody stayed all happy clappy is what we have right in front of us this morning. So, was this what Paul was trying to say to the church in Philippi? That they always had to have a smile on their face. That they had to rejoice and celebrate all the time, even if they had to fake it to make it. You ever have to fake it to make it? Yeah, it happens. Nobody feels good all the time, do they? We all have days, we all have seasons in our lives where we feel like something that the cat dragged in, right? So what are we to make of Paul's words on days like that? Are we being disobedient? Are we sinning if we don't manage to put a happy, smiley face on our visage all the time? See, part of me gets what HB's church was trying to say here. Because, what if a visitor comes to church and, there's sad people in church? Wow, that's bad for business. And I can think of some ways to justify this line of thinking. We could say, well, Paul is telling the church to do something. He's not telling the church how to feel. He's not telling them to feel something. He's telling them to do something, to act on something. Rejoice. Celebrate. That's something that you do that doesn't depend on how you feel sometimes. And this seems logical too, especially during this time of year, because, we can all probably relate to this a little bit too much, huh? Because people are holding Christmas parties right now. They're getting ready for big family gatherings. And there is this unwritten expectation of coming off happy during this time of year, whether you feel like it or not. Because, sometimes people just kind of grit their teeth and put on their smiley face so that they can gather with people that they can barely stand and pretend that everything is all peachy. But here's something related to that. Here's something that I want you to think about. Because some people might even put off telling friends or family during this time of year about life-changing events, like illnesses or something like that. They may put off telling people that for the whole month of December so as not to ruin someone's Christmas. But we do this. And we generally accept, and when I say we, I'm talking we as a society generally accept that for the sake of others, there are times when putting off bad news is the right thing to do. Like weddings, for example, okay? For one day, don't cast a shadow on someone else's special day, right? And so using this logic, you could argue that since every Sunday is a celebration of the resurrection of Jesus, then it is appropriate to put on a happy face when we come to church and celebrate, no matter how we feel. But there is a problem with that line of reasoning, though. There's a problem with that. Because the reason we accept that we shouldn't sour somebody's wedding or birthday is because it is somebody else's big day. It's not appropriate to be out of step and draw attention from them to you. So we keep it to ourselves for one day out of love and respect to our friends and loved ones. But who benefits from this if we do this every time we come to worship, right? Whose big day is it when we come to worship? It's Jesus' big day. It's God's big day. So, how would we be doing God any favors by putting on a fake happy smile? See, we honor God by offering ourselves to God. Our real selves, not our fake selves, our real selves. We can't fool God anyway, right? You just can't. So God isn't going to find our worship any more acceptable because of our fakery. Okay? So, you might say, well, this is okay and everything like that, but what about, whose benefit can we be doing it for? Maybe for the visitors? What about visitors? Well, I don't know about you, but I don't want to be guilty of false advertising. If folks are being attracted to what we pretend to be rather than what we really are, we're not doing anyone any favors. Good point there, Jesse. But we still haven't addressed what Paul meant when he wrote this. Great. What does it mean to rejoice in the Lord always, even if we don't feel like it? Well, I can't claim to speak definitively for Paul. Neither can our Pauline scholar Katie, but we do our best. Here's how we think it relates to us, though. First of all, this statement is addressed to the church, not individuals. It is quite a different thing to tell a church to rejoice than it is to tell an individual to rejoice. Because when you say this to a church, it's not a lot different than saying worship always. Rejoice is describing something about the nature of our worship. When we come together, we are celebrating who God is and what God does. We are celebrating the love that we have found in Jesus, and we are rejoicing about what that means for us. And we all contribute to that celebration. Now, I don't think that means we all have to plaster fake smiles on our faces and pretend that everything is all hunky-dory. We don't have to deny the reality that we live in order to celebrate. When we gather for worship, we acknowledge up front that this group, whatever group that we are gathering with, does not come with the same feelings and attitudes. And that's okay. That is authentic worship, when people can come as they are. Because we have a whole spectrum of different experiences right here in this room, shaping us when we arrive here to worship. And to some extent, that does shape the mood of our worship. But here's the thing. We don't have to put on a mask to participate, because we can join into the celebration if we aren't feeling up to it. We acknowledge that God can not only accommodate all of our different moods and feelings and things like that, but God can transcend that. So then, when we gather to worship with our mixed bag of feelings and join in with this continuing celebration of God, it's not a denial of the reality that we're in our lives right now. Our feelings are okay. They are natural. That's something, ever since Mary has been working on her chaplain work, has been trying to teach me. Validate feelings. Feelings are okay. You don't have to fake things. They're normal. Even if we are feeling angry towards God, we're not called to fake it. And we are not called to pretend that worship begins and ends with me. And how I feel today. This joy that Paul is talking about here, it's not to be confused with happiness either, because happiness is a feeling. Happiness depends more on circumstances from day to day. Joy, it's different. Joy is deeper, much deeper. It surpasses our understanding. And so, rather than deny reality, we are called to worship from within our reality. which helps us reach out in faith to a new reality. And this stretching for a new reality is part of our Advent experience. It's that what Mary was saying and what Tom said even at the beginning. It's that reaching for the new experience, the anticipation. Come, thou long expected Jesus. Come, O come, Emmanuel. That kind of worship is a declaration that although we may not be feeling the fullness of life that God has promised right here and right now, we are putting our trust in God and celebrating the fact that God's promised new reality is bigger and more present than our current reality. We're celebrating the God who has, through the Christ child, entered into the despair that this world can inflict on us, but then rises and raises us up too. We are celebrating our hope that whatever's going on for us right now, our share of the resurrected life is assured. We are celebrating the God who comes to us in the fragile promise of a baby. And we are celebrating our hope that no matter how lost and frightened and unwanted we may feel in the moment, God is always being born again in our midst.